Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name is Clinton Butt and I'm a granite sculptor. Welcome to video number 202 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Alright, I've done quite a bit just working on her drapery and on her lower portion, trying to fine tune edges. You'll find as you work this and you learn how to really do your drapery, you'll look back, if you've done, as you do successive jobs, you'll find out usually your drapery improves a lot. And a lot of that has to do with fixing edges, because an edge will look really good in one direction, maybe in two directions, but then when you look at a third direction and get a different perspective on it, it doesn't look good. So you do a lot of fine tuning to get any inconsistency out that makes it look mainly like the stone's broken, because that's what it'll look like. But I'm at a point now where I'm not wanting to make her too small. And so I'm gonna go ahead and put together her head in terms of where it needs to be. I'm not going to carve the detail, but I'm going to go ahead and do that. And this is, part of this has got to do with making sure everything's in the right place. So I can proceed, because this point here is pretty tall compared to this, because I put a riser on it. Remember that little clay riser I put? And so I use that point as reference to her, and on here this looks good, but I want to make sure they merge, and I want to weave extra material on her up here, this upper part, where I index the saw. By lifting the machine out on the job, it brings some of this, brings it forward a little bit. Not a lot, but because this one was right on the money. This was right on the plastic. This one's out, so there's a little extra material in here that I can cheat with if I need to. And I don't think I'll have to, but it's nice to have extra material. So I went ahead, I've got this point set up to go to the end of her nose. And on the model, that's up about, not quite a quarter inch. So when I go over here on the stone, starting with it, we'd already shot this point here that I stayed up about an inch or so, and there's still a solid inch right there that I'm going to take off and get to her, the end of her nose. So I'm going to start with I'm going to do a line up in front of her face, pretty much. Try to get, I'm not going to carve her nose. I want to get just a line up in front of her face to know where the front of her face is. And that will help me get a profile from the side. And then I can continue working. So I'll do some pointing and we'll be back in a little bit. All right? Check this out. Okay. When I say that I stayed up, that I put a riser or a piece of clay over here on her to make, when I was shooting on the clay, on the plaster, so there was a riser here, okay? And you gotta slow down and think about this, okay? When I did this, that raised this point that I was producing, okay? And so it produced this point. All right, follow me, okay? What I don't want you to understand is that by moving the pointing machine chassis, the actual frame, it's not gonna cooperate here as well. When you move the chassis and you move the screws, like on the model, okay, that gets into something different, okay? By adding this to the plaster, I pointed this level. I added that much material potential You know, I didn't surrender volume, okay? Because in comparison to the plaster, this point is, well, that's about half an inch. Yeah, this point is 3/4 of an inch right here, taller than on the plaster model. Okay, she's really flat chested, that's okay. But on here, this point, this foundation point that I'm using for the chassis, this point right here is exactly the same in relationship to this one, okay? And that's something I don't want anybody to misunderstand. In regards to the stone, I would have to take this, okay, this height, and I would have to reverse it and to go that deep, you know, and expand it for the model in order for this to match the plaster, okay? What you're going to find out is that if you move these points up and down, and you generally don't have the opportunity to move the points up and down on the stone, okay? You cut the stone is where you cut it, all right? But it's very simple when you've got screws to back a screw out. Lift the pointing machine up, lift it down. And that can help you locate where something is in regards to where your foundation points are. And this is what I'm trying to understand how to explain it to you. Once you start using your pointing machine and you go back and forth, unless you change like this, if you change this height between measurements, like you take a measurement and then you, for whatever reason, you bump it, you drop it, you whatever, and you change this and then you apply it to the job, you'll have a problem. If you change these, like I've mentioned, you know, these can be sharpened again because these are getting dull, especially the one up on top. The one up on top isn't particularly sharp anymore at all. But I can sharpen that, and as long as I don't take a measurement or apply a measurement between when I move this and when I take it, okay, like I take a measurement and then I move all my screws and I put on the job, that'll screw you up, okay, it really will. I could move all of these screws now, all these nails, I could move them. And they will, and then go ahead and take a measurement, take a point, and apply it to the stone. That's not going to change anything, okay? As long as I don't change in between. If the screws change, you know, in between, you know, if one of these screws moves up or down in between measurements, that can be a problem. I can't go back and visit my points with the same measurement if I change this. Because if the chassis moves in towards the model or moves away from the model, the actual measurement to the point would be different. I hope that makes sense. But as long as you don't change between taking a measurement and applying a measurement, you'll be fine. So, but it's important to understand that by lowering or something, by adding a little bit when I pointed off the model, I left it high. So then I could have extra material here as I'm pointing that, and that's going to help me marry everything else. For the top of her head, I just measured along the center line, put a nail on the approximate center, where I thought it needed to be, on the center line on top of the stone, and it's above the very top of the stone, just a tiny bit. So her whole head should fit into this. And it looks really wonky right now, but it will. But it's as you point whether you're using your foundation, your compasses, or whether you're using a triangle or a pointing machine. You've got to understand what happens if you move a point, a foundation point in or out, and how that translates to how the equipment you're using works on the job. Okay, I pointed this point on her right here. I pointed that high, and that's the same thing as leaving the needle sticking out a little bit and putting a circle around it that represents radius. Okay, I've been explaining that all along. It's the same kind of thing. You know, I wish we'd had a more simple project to carve, ornate project, like a figurative something to carve and just point it before now. It's not the way it worked. Got into this, and this is the kind of thing that people always talk about. They don't show up and say, you know, I've always wanted to carve a little Sacred Heart niche in a bas relief in a niche that's 2.5 inches deep. I always wanted to do that. People don't show up saying that. They want to carve a big fancy angel. And so this project was at hand and was able to walk through everything, so that's what we're doing. But I don't want you to get mixed up on why I did. Once I pointed the foundation points from the plaster to here, these are static and they'll correlate exactly to this. Now if I had, and as long as my points, I don't know if y'all see this. As long as these points are basically the same, there's no issue there. If I sunk this point 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch way in deep, it would tend to bring this figure forward. Okay, does that make sense? So you have to learn where your foundation points are and why they need to be where they are, because you may have to do that in order to bring a detail forward or have it further deeper in the stone. But as long as you don't change the actual screws or nails or the foundation points between taking a measurement and applying it, then they should correlate. Okay. But you want to set them up right in the first place. And I tried to set these up where they're approximately where they would be on her in real life, you know, in the stone. And then I set those from the plaster, and I was concerned that one side was a little short, so I added some material. Okay. Hope that didn't confuse you even more. But, all right, I'm going to get back to carving. We've taken some off her face, and pretty happy with it. I'm going to do a little bit more, and then I think we're getting close on this video. I'll have to go take a look at it. So, but anyways, back to work. All right, I've got a question that came up on the last video that I just posted, and I wanted to touch on it here. So I lost my hat. I just grabbed a spare one to keep clean. I mentioned how I'm varying from the models some as I need to, like with the drapery, how I'm adjusting it, and was asked if it's better to always follow the model, if it's better to make some adjustments as you need to. You know, you obviously have to have some experience if you're going to make adjustments so that it looks right. And the answer to everything pretty much is yes. Okay. The challenge with doing the drapery in following a model is that none of this is done through the magical machine that does everything perfect. This is all done by people, okay? And so when you get a model, and you know, the old models, you'd get like a Deprado, you know, like a plaster model. It's a Deprado that, you know, that would be ordered. It's an antique model, and they're gorgeous. I mean, they're exquisite. Like, you know, like the model here oh, I don't know if I can swing this in the back. This one over here, there, you know, that Mary right there. You know, it's a really nice model. And she's got a lot of folds in her drapery. Can you put every one of those folds on the job? Probably. Are you getting paid to put every one of those folds on the job? Probably not. Okay, so there's going to be a balance in there as to what you actually do and what you don't do, what you show, what you carve. It's all got to work. Okay. The important part is that the drapery looks believable. It looks the way it should. And I don't remember with all my videos if I've talked about the carvings that I've got in front of my studio. And I think I've mentioned it, but I'll go over it real quick. It's sort of I don't know, tradition is a weird way to put it. A lot of times the sculpture studio have an antique piece of carved stone in front of their studio. And it typically is something that was, maybe it was salvaged, they were tearing something down. Maybe it was damaged and they replaced it. You know, you've got something for an old piece of sculpture. And I've got 3 stones out front that were damaged. A truck actually went through a cemetery and they damaged these 3 stones, and they sent them to me to be reproduced. They actually sent 4 of them. There's a 4th one, a little one. But 3 of them have an open book on a slant, and which can be the Book of Life if it's got your information in it, or it can be the Bible if it has scripture in it. So that's typical of a generic type stone that you would have had on a lot, and then when you sell it, they would go and do the extra stuff. And these would be carved by somebody that was just sitting around waiting for something to do. And they'd keep a few of these in stock when they were working on sold work. So one of them was really, the oldest one's really nice, carved really well. The second one is pretty good, carved. It's real similar. It's also Italian stone. It's pretty nice. The third one is in Georgia marble, and it was carved by somebody that wasn't trained, and it's folk. It's not, I don't want to say it's funny, but I mean, the book isn't great, the panel isn't great, the drapery doesn't follow gravity, you know, and things like that matter, okay? It makes it look wonky when the drapery doesn't, you know, when it's supposed to fall down from the top, and instead it goes like this, and you've got folds that are going, you know, 45, 60 degrees off from vertical, with the end of it just kind of magically suspended. Doesn't make any sense. So as long as the drapery that I'm doing on her is correct, it doesn't have to be perfectly accurate to the model. I went on to explain that the model is produced by a person, okay? And that person may be working just in clay and supposed to do a really fancy job, like this Mary here in the corner, in the back. She's really great. Let me grab this while I'm thinking. This is great. I didn't think about that. So Mary is pretty complicated, and she looks good, but there's a lot going on. Then you have something that, and this is dirty because it's been on the floor and everything else. The gesso's coming off of it. You've got something like this that's very simple, almost to a flaw. And part of the problem with this is that there is very little detail on the surface. And what that means is that it's hard for a viewer to look at that surface and understand what the shape is, okay? I pointed out in my answer to that question, and this is a pet peeve that I have with the old motorcycles and cars that I enjoy so much. And when people start customizing old cars, a lot of times they'll take and they'll smooth off all the body lines. If there's a ridge, or if there's some trim that goes up and down or wherever around the wheels, they take all that stuff off, and it turns that car that you understood, that you would recognize because there's a piece of chrome trim here, that there's a certain shape that trim is on top of. It helps you interpret that shape when you see it with your binocular vision from a different perspective. It helps you see what that shape is and interpret it and understand it, versus having something that's very smooth. And see, you can't really tell a lot of this as I'm turning it, whether there's anatomy under there or not. And aside from her being stylized, it doesn't communicate well. I grabbed a hubcap that I had just that came in the mail. And this is really easy to understand versus what we call a smoothie, that's just a smooth, round surface. It's hard to interpret that smooth surface. This has all this detail in it. It even has some little dents, and those dents can help with the reflection and help you understand what the shape is. The function of this drapery on these stone carvings, okay? This drapery isn't keeping her warm. Those clothes aren't keeping her, warm from the wind. They're communicating the shape of her body to the viewer. And by having multiple lines for any given area, it helps you understand how that shape that's underneath here changes as you travel across it with your eyes. It helps you see it more completely, more thoroughly, without having to go up personally and touch it and try to figure out just what's going on, because I don't get that. I've got to make sure that this arm looks like there's an arm and that it's not rubber anatomy. This is going to go back, this will go back some. I'm working on her face. I pushed a bunch of stone off, and I'm going to keep doing that to get her face approximately put together, and know, like, this is right near where the tip of her nose is going to be. And she's going to really start coming together as this face is pushed off, and her posture, how she stands and everything, the details of what the drapery shows of how the rest of her body is. This allows us to communicate. That's why the drapery is there, okay? Because these lines indicate what's under it and what's acting upon this representation of fabric. It should have gravity. Gravity should be pulling it. It should follow an organized behavior in terms of gravity, because we all know what happens if you pick something up, and you drop it, it falls. And drapery is pending. If I pick up my dust mask here, if these were just kind of floating up in the air or were standing out to the side like this, y'all don't want to know what was going on, because it's supposed to fall. It's supposed to hang. And so we want to make sure that we communicate that concept of gravity, that reality of gravity that we understand with our fabric, with the folds on my shirt and how my shirt hangs down and my pants hang down and everything. We want that same concept here, because that communicates to the viewer what's going on, while these surface details indicate what's under it. Okay, and so if you smooth this off, there are people that will do a carving and they'll carve it perfectly smooth. There are certain icons that we do, Lady of Fatima, and she's got a robe that has filigree, sort of a division down the center, and she's a very smooth figure. And it's complicated to carve those well, because they end up just looking like this, like this one I was showing you. It's just so smooth that you can't really tell much of what's going on. And so there's more, the drapery is more important than it may seem, okay? And so I wanted to put that in here because far too many people, and this is one of my, talk about pet peeves with the cars with smoothing everything off. This is one of the things that aggravates me a lot about people that begin carving and they're going to polish and smooth everything. You have all this very naive carving, okay? And I'll put this out there and you can flame me or cancel me or whatever you're going to do. But there's a lot of people that call themselves stone carvers and sculptors, and all they do with a piece of stone is they put some shape onto it, they cut stuff away, they break stuff away, and then they go to grinding on it, and they'll have a part of it that's polished. They'll polish it all up nice and smooth. Oh, it's so shiny, so beautiful, look how perfect it is. And they put it out there and they call it art. Okay, no, I don't. Yeah, I mean, call it art, but I don't see where you've accomplished anything. You made a shiny surface. When I see that, I go into I polish stone and I want to see how perfect it is. And if it isn't like glass, like absolutely flat, perfect, it's got all them little wiggles in it, that means they're just trying to pull a parlor trick on you and put something flashy in front of you and think you're going to ooh and ah. Okay? There's some jobs local here that are granite that were done by somebody that's done a whole bunch of stuff like that, in their art. And if you get down and look at them, they're all crooked and wonky. And to me, that's embarrassing. If I'm a finisher and there's an imperfection in the top of that stone where I was trying to deal with, there was a little scuff on it from before I got it, and there's a little dip in that polish. And that, to me, I'm pretty certain it's going to be underneath the stone. So it's not that big of a deal, but that tears me up. But I can't, I'm not have the equipment to take the entire top of that stone down a 1/16 of an inch. I can go for it and spend a long time working on it, and I'm probably not going to have a better result than what I've got, than just trying to get through the saw skin and working it down. But when I see something that's really, really crooked and it's supposed to be impressive, it's not. But people, they take and they want to polish something, they want to make it all shiny. They'll polish it, they'll have rough, they'll have polish, they'll have a rotation, and they'll have a penetration. And that covers the vast majority of quote unquote art stone carvings that you go out there and see. You see how many of those things have got at least one, if not two, three, or all four of those deals. Rotation, polish, rough, and penetration. That's what people do. And then they say, well, the stone spoke to me, and I felt it. Oh, it was. And then this is so wonderful to touch it here where it's soft. Oh, and it's all, no. Carve something. And put real detail in it so you can actually understand what it is. It's difficult to interpret a shape. Think about a jellyfish in the ocean that's just blobbing around. When you see a picture one straight on, it's really hard to tell what the shape is like. But this is coming good. But I wanted to bring up, that about the drapery. I want the drapery to be very accurate to the model. This fold is a little bit different. I've shrunken it some to make it closer to the model. And there's a little difference over here because of that one point we had where I got deeper than I wanted, but this should work out well. This is going to sink back here, which will change the tension on here quite a bit. So, but it's coming well. And I got a lot off her face. I took the better part of an inch off of most of her face, and we'll keep going, but this will be the end of her nose, and then I'm working up here on her forehead, and it's hard to see that she'll fit in here, but she really will. So, but I'll get back to work. Okay, I've been working. Let's see how this looks. I'm trying to get the light to look pretty well. I've taken a bunch off of her head. I don't know if this will help or not. Back up just a little bit. All right, I know she looks like Rock'em Sock'em Robots, blockhead, whatever. But right now, where's the pencil? These points are her across her cheekbone, okay? So her eyebrows are clear up here. So her eyes are going to be up in here. This is where the volume, and this is just extra volume for the eyes. This point is the just above the end of her lip, top of her lip, and this is the end of her nose. So there's a lot that's got to thin down, but you can see, you should be able to see some of the posture coming together. And I'll get into this more as, you know, on the next video. And it's still all that flat above her, you know, this is where all of her hair will be, is up in here. And part of this exercise here, she's going to start to thin up as she's released from the stone. When we take the stone off the top, it'll be a huge difference. I don't want to do that until I get the rest of the side put together. You know, we may end up doing over her head, but we'll leave this portion above the wing. But we've done a lot of cutting. I did want to show in some of the digging here, as I worked with my hand machine, you see where I fractured that edge because I bumped against it. This is waste, it's no big deal, but you've got to start really being aware of that, because if you lean in and lean on her nose or lean on her chin, it can cause permanent failures. But like this deep spot right here on her neck is 1.5 inches below her chin. So there's still a lot of stone to come off here. You know, this is way up on the peak of her chin. There's a lot to come off, but lots of digging. And she's going to start coming out of the stone more and more and more. So more in the next video. My name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor here at Carolina Sculpture Studio with the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.